So, I have a pretty cool project today. Now that I've finally got some good video editing software on my phone, and put something pretty cool together. I've actually been busy on the Impreza, and I had some leftover stuff from when I had the Green Forester, and I'm going to tell you guys and show you how to install strut spacers like these. And these are the taller ones, they're 2 inch. They're probably the tallest ones you can get without needing some other extensive work like CV axles, steering assembly or chassis, stuff like that, subframe lift or whatever. Because they're pretty thick. You got to think with the 2 inch spacers, the way the A arms, extend out. If you lift 2 inches at the strut, then the further out at the end, by the time you get to the wheel, it's actually going to lift it more than 2 inches. So you're looking at 2.5, 3 inch lift with a 2 inch spacer. That's why people usually go out of their trouble and buy 1 inch, 1.5, because actually the effective lift is still going to be a good bit of lift. So don't overdo it. But my springs are actually sagging in the rear anyways, so I figure it'll help make up for it, plus give me a little lift. Now later, if I go get new struts on this thing, it's going to be up there a good bit. But I got one side done, and it reminded me of a couple of tips and tricks that I had forgotten about. So now I'll be able to make a little bit better video doing the other side, showing not just all the stupid stuff, but the main points, the important stuff, and stuff that'll help you out a lot. It helps to have a big jack, a big floor jack, like that. But it also helps to have a small rolling floor jack like this as extra. Unless you're, if you're using a small one, fine. Jack the car up, put it on jack stands. That way you can free up the small jack. Because I actually learned a pretty neat little trick. When you, how do I explain this? Okay, the spacers are gonna make the struts a lot longer. So it's gonna be hard to get the spindle knuckle bolts pushed back, not the bolts, but the bracket pushed back into the strut so that you can get the bolts through the holes. It's going to be really hard. What you do with the car lifted up on jack stands, or in my case, the big jack, I can use the little jack to push the control arm up and down, or push it out there on the brake drum or brake rotor, whichever I put a couple of lug nuts on it to hold it in there good, and I use the little jack to push up on it, and what it'll do, like say these are your lug nut, your bolts right here, and then I got the jack under it. What it does, it as it lifts it, it pries it like this, and helps me to gradually do it until my bolt holes can line up. And I may have to tap on the knuckle a little with a hammer, but it just helps you to line your control arm up. When I got it stabbed through the bottom bolt holes, I used the little jack to push the strut up and hold it, and then jump up on the top of the, in the trunk, and put my nuts and get them started. And then I let the jack back down and wiggled it around, and then I worked on the bottom side trying to get it into the knuckle. So the little jack is, you can't do without it. It's a world of help. So after learning a couple of tricks like that, you are going to have to get a strut spring compressor set like this. You can rent these for about 40 bucks at O'Reilly's, probably AutoZone, I don't know. But you're going to need them because you're going to have to align your studs. This thing, see, the spacer's got its own studs, right? But you see how they're offset? So what you're going to do once they're on there, you're going to have to rotate the top hat a little bit, just that amount of space between the hole and the new studs till it lines right back up, okay? And you're going to, like, I'll show you, but looking at the strut from above, you'll have to line the outer bolt up like this, right here. It'll face the outside of the car perfectly. And the way to know when you're looking at the strut, with the strut off, is just look over it and down at the bracket where the two bolt holes go through it to bolt it onto the spindle, the knuckle. And if you line that bolt up pointing straight toward you while that bracket's pointed straight toward you, you're good. Now you got to kind of hold it there while you use the impact to back off of the strut compressors so that the spring will open up and put tension on it, and then, you know, it'll hold itself in place once the spring's tight. But I ran into that problem. I couldn't figure it out, and then I remembered. I was like, son of a, the bolt holes aren't going to line up right. I forgot, and I had to just, you know, get it apart, go rent the compressor, and smooth sailing after that. So far, it looks like the car is actually on the jack a little, but it's not. It's, you know, 100% lift, and it's not 100% what it would be, since the other side is still low. So it's actually, you know, you got the sway bar with the other side low. It's gonna sag a little all the way across the back of the car, albeit unevenly. So it's actually probably, it may be higher once I get the other side done, but we'll see. I'm not gonna let you, make you guys watch me jack the car up and take the wheel off. Simple crap like that should be pretty obvious. So, but once I start taking the struts out and this and that, I'll make, I'm going to show you guys little clips and whatnot. So anyway, be right back. Wheels are off. I would go ahead and put the lug nuts back on to hold the drum or rotor, depending on, your car and all. But hold the rotor or drum shut. Well, if you use a jack under it later, it won't try to bow up on you. It'll keep it stable and give you a nice flat surface to lift on. And I'll show you why later. Basically, what you're going to need to do is get the brake hose right here. Pop this clip out to where the hose will be loose from the strut. And then you're going to have to get a... truck's really loud. Good God. You're gonna want to get on the Subaru, it's a 19 mil. Everything's metric, obviously, and use it for a backing. And I'm using the impact to get these strut bolts out on the knuckle. Probably easier to, obviously, use your brain, but some of these are hard to get into, so you can use an open end on it down here to hold it, and then of course stick your impact on the back sides over here where you have space. And then I would go ahead and back upper or lower, but I do the upper curve on the sway bar. It's easier to get to, and pull the bolt out. That way you don't have resistance on your control arm, because you're going to need to move it up and down freely whenever you're getting this thing in and out and positioning it. So that's kind of a run through. And once you've got all that loose, you can get up here, and under these covers on both sides you have the little pull-off covers This is on WRX Impreza Forester. Outback, it's all pretty much the same. You can lean the seat forward a little out of the way and pop the covers off. And you got a little bit of insulation for sound and whatnot. There's your top hat bolts right there. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Those are the three on top of the strut that spacer goes on, obviously. And that should sum it up. You don't have to get the brakes apart or anything like that. You don't have to undo control arms. You don't have to do any of it. You can leave all that together. Now, if you see this trailing arm here that goes up towards the front of the car, depending on how far this lifts, like say you had new struts that were good and tall already, see mine were sagging, so it's not going to lift it quite as badly. But if you go a full 2-inch spacer, right, with new struts, it's going to lift it to an extent where as this goes down, there's not enough length because it's at an angle. So it's drawing this inward. As it goes downward, you're losing length on the trailing arm. So depending on how far it lifts the car, it may draw the hub assembly and strut inward and tow it in on both sides, and they'll be able to compensate if it's not overdone. Like mine won't be overdone with my saggy springs, but if you have new struts and then go a full 2-inch lift spacer, they can compensate a little when they do your alignment. They'll be able to get mine straight, but if it overdoes it, you're going to need to get a spacer. These are 3 bolts. There's one back here, and then these 2 bolts. And it's a little spacer, same length as your strut spacer. And what it'll do, see the angle? It'll square it back up to where your length, it's pushes it back square. So right now it's down a good ways because obviously the axle's dropped, there's nothing under it. So but you lift it too much, it'll be sitting like that with the wheels on it and the weight on it. So that's how they compensate. That's what those other spacers are for. But I'm using my old springs. My struts were good. I checked the other side, tried to move it up and down, and it's got good resistance. So just, you know, they're just worn out springs. I can live with that. And anyways, start taking this crap apart, and I'll be right back. You remember me mentioning the small jack? What you're going to want to do is, one reason is to use it to line your control arm up where your sway bar is. Take some stress off of it so you can get the bolt out a little easier. Remember, this is just hanging, so it's nowhere near level with the other. You can kind of tell when it's about even. It'll help a little. So I managed to get these out. I did use the little jack under the brake drum to help pull up on it, kind of reposition it as I went to where it lined the bolts up a little better to get the tension off of them, to where it was easier to bump the bolts on out. So, you know, like I said, feel free to use the jack, or, you know, I actually also stuck a wrench in here to where it kind of curved behind the knuckle here, kind of like a wedge, to where I could bump on the top of it with a hammer and bump it on out of the bracket here, because it is kind of tight. But now, as you can see, it's loose. What we like now is, you we got the sway bar loose, that's loose, our brake hose is out of the way, and what we got to do now is, the only thing holding it is the 3 nuts on top of the strut, and it'll pretty much just fall out. I may kind of have to maneuver it on out of here, but that's the gist of it. And then we can get to putting our spacer up there. So, and as I said, make sure your lug nuts are on here if you pry, so that it makes it a solid foundation. You don't want to pry on it with these loose and end up hurting your brake hardware or something like that, or making it wiggle around and eat the threads on your studs. Be smart about it. Plus, hey, can't lose the lug nuts if they're on the studs, right? So I'm gonna get back up there and break our strut bolts loose up here. Remember, they're up here in the hat, and I'm just using a little 1/4 inch ratchet or 3/8, nothing crazy, but they're let's see, 12 millimeter. Now usually on these adapters you'll end up with a different size nuts on these adapters, because obviously they're not made by Subaru, they're somewhere else. But it really doesn't matter. I mean, you got a socket set, so who cares? So those will go back on. You'll still need your 12, but whatever your adapter nuts use, just you'll have another socket to go ahead and bolt them up there once they're on. So anyway, let's drop this sucker down real quick, and I'll show you how the spring compressor works real quick, and zip on through. I'll compress it and show you what I mean about the top mount. Alright, I got it loose, but something you're going to want to note when you pull the hat off, you may want to go ahead and mark which side is which, because these two are closer together and this one's further out, but it's really hard to tell sometimes just by sight, so it can get really annoying. So I'm about to mark it with a Sharpie. I mean, nobody will be able to see it once it's put together under the cover and everything, so it really doesn't matter. But I mean, an arrow or something like that, anything helps. So that's going to be your outer arrow. That's going to be important here in a minute. Also, whenever we dive into doing the mount, rotating the mount around and all that, so that's going to matter. And see, I'd already marked this one also, because when I had my other hat off, I matched it up with the bolt holes. See, it won't go any other way. You got to have it just right. So that's pretty important. And I got to save these separately. These are the ones that go on the actual strut itself. The threads are the same. I know that. I'm saving them. And then these I picked out of a bolt box. A little nuts and bolts box. So there's that. They're matched up and everything. So they do use different sockets, but that's okay, like I said before. So we're going to go around here to the strut that probably just fell out pretty much. See, it's pretty much loose. They tried to jam itself down in there again, but I'll wiggle it on out of there and we'll get to putting that adapter on. Here's the strut. I went ahead and washed it off, because you're going to have mud caked up all over it probably. I mean, well, if not mud, at least a lot of dirt. Check your boot, and if this is sitting on bottom, you may want to get it to mount back up there. See all that crap? You don't want it getting in your piston. And I'll show you how to check the strut, make sure it's okay, because we're going to have to undo the top bolt here in a little while anyways, and it'll try to go up a little, and I'll be able to wiggle it around. and check the strut. But the boot's important to keep dirt from going down in it and then piling up down here and going up and down the piston, because eventually scratches or dirt eating on that seal is going to ruin the strut and make it pretty much non-compliant. Remember, this keeps, this is what holds the car up, lets it flex, but your strut, your actual shock absorber, is what keeps it from being able to make jarring motions. Or if you go over a hole, it keeps it from just going. It makes it a lot slower motion. It's a slow resistance. And in other words, if you flew over a pothole, the tire wouldn't be able to fully drop in the hole that quick or jar back up. So it absorb it. You'll feel it a little, but it won't just fall all the way in the hole and then just slam the car. So, and of course over dips and stuff, it keeps the car from getting bouncy and wonky or whatever. But we'll check those in a minute too. I gotta go get my impact and get my spring compressors mounted up here and ready to go. Got to tell y'all, I'm gonna go ahead and mount the adapter so that when I get the spring compressed, I know where to line it up at, because it's going to be right here. Remember us marking the outside? Well, your outside probably have marks on the springs. Even if it doesn't, it should line up with that bracket. Remember, it faced the outside of the car, so it's pretty self-explanatory. But so that being said, this is the outside, and that's going to be the outside hole. So I'm going to stick it on there like that, mount it, and then get my compressor, compress it. That way I can rotate the top around. Alright, I'll be right back. Trying to talk down to anybody if you guys have used these before, but this is basically the gist of it. These things clamp on, and as you tighten them up here, they draw in and squish the coil spring. Now you're gonna want to go back and forth to try to get it evenly as you compress it, because if you bow it up on one side, you risk one of these slipping sideways and popping out and probably going through the wall or through you or something else. Not gonna lie, these make me nervous, especially when the safety pins are broken that pop out under it to keep it from slipping out. But y'all just be careful. But we're only going to get it as far as we need to be able to rotate this top piece, right? So I'm also going to undo the top nut up here, because I want to check the strut itself, or I want to at least show you how. So I'm going to get the impact once I get the coil spring compressed, and I'm going to loosen this nut right here and pull up and down on the rod and see what kind of a resistance I get, just for an illustration. But I checked the other side. If they've not been replaced separately, then it should be as good as the other side. But with that boot, the way it was hanging, mud getting in it, it's possible that it could be weak. We'll see. Just remember, it won't just go boing. It's made to be a resistance, a slower, right, some kind of a resistance. These are actually a rebound and what holds the car up. The strut, the shock absorbers absorb shock. They slow things down so that you don't get bounces and jiggles and jarring and whatnot. So don't expect it to just pop out like a spring or whatever. I should be able to push it in and pull it out, but it should not let me just do this, right? It should be very hard to move except very slowly. So we'll see how this goes. Oh, also, jack stands, sitting on the jack stand, it's because the jack leaked pressure down over time. So, you know, always put your jack stands under it. Even if the jack normally holds good, it leaked down over a couple hours time. So if you had it sitting overnight, yeah, you might come to the car sitting on the ground and not even be able to get it back up off the ground after it destroys your rear brakes and everything. So, alright, let's get to work here. Go get my impact and my socket set to get this out and these tight. Just not in that order, of course. So, I got the center nut loose and was mashing up and down and pulling the shaft, and it's got a lot of good resistance to it, so it's still good. And I've got space. You don't have to take the nut off up here in order to rotate it if you don't want, because the shaft will rotate. It's mounted on the shaft, that's what that nut goes on, but it'll rotate on its own. You just have to get the spring compressed enough to where the plate up here will rotate with it without having to drag the spring and all the resistance and everything, right? So here's our bracket, the way it goes into the suspension knuckle, right? So you're going to want everything to line up with the bolt, your outer bolt here on the adapter. It used to be this one, remember, but now it's this one because it's catty-cornered, so you need to rotate it in till it lines up good. So I can actually do it without moving the spring. Right about there. Alright. And it may take you a lot of eyeballing in order to get it just right. Or, let's see. Tell you what, bungee, good long bungee cord, string, something like that. Watch this. If you hang it on your outer bolt here and let gravity do the rest, you can see if you've got it squared up or not. See? And it looks pretty good. I mean, as straight as can be expected. Of course, a rope will do better because, as you can see, the rubber is kind of thick. So if I tilt it side to side, it may try to, let's see, we'll do it like that. Get it good and still. It's still square. It's good enough. You'll be able to get it in there. So that's how you can use that to square it up. And y'all gotta excuse this mess here. I'm tearing the car apart and she's gardening, so it is what it is. Pegboard, priceless, and the rest we just moved here not too long ago, so it is what it is. But anyways, let me get on this and back these out without trying to move it around. I'm actually going to mark where that bolt lines up on here. And actually, if you look real close, there's actually the marks lined up with that. If you can do it as good as possible. I don't know how that managed because it's actually, see where it lines up on this, the hole. The new one happened to have it lined up between those two numbers just by chance, but that's where it needs to be. So it's actually kind of in between at the moment. It's very close though. anyways, let me get on that and see if I can't stab it back in there. Here again, the little small jack is your best friend. Alright, you don't even need the stick that bad. Just go ahead and close the valve. Use this to jack the strut up using the control arm. See, I don't even have the bolts in it yet. Okay, it's just sitting in there. Once I got it lined up pretty good, I was using my fingers to feel and line it up. And once I got it close, got my knee under here, right, and pushed up on it. And while I rotated the spring back and forth to get my holes to catch. And if at least the rear hole that's closest to it catches, you can reach over here and jack the jack up a little bit to hold it in place. And with that one bolt stuck in that hole, the others will be lower, see, so it'll be able to rotate, and you'll be able to kind of wiggle it back and forth as you lift on it a little, and eventually they'll line up and pop on in there. And see, since the jack's under it, once they pop in, guess what? It holds it in place. And all you gotta do is come right back around and grab your nuts here. The brass ones, not yours. And go ahead and slip them in. Try not to drop them anywhere, but see, there's a spacer. There's everything. I did have a little trouble keeping the spring lined up while I adjusted the spring compressors back off, but keep an eye on it and keep an eye on your hat alignment, and it'll make it a lot easier. Though basically, as long as they're fairly close, it will go on. You want it pretty close, but the main thing is, the closer it is, the better it'll be once you get down there at the bracket, trying to put the big bolts through the bracket. Because if it's off center, even though these line up and go through, it'll be off center down there instead, and it'll be harder to get it started. It's doable, it's not a big deal, but it can be pretty aggravating. Okay, so looks like I got a switch here to the 1/2 inch. Remember I said the sockets were in fact you know, a little different. Not a big deal, just an annoyance, but nothing we can't deal with, right? Alright, there we go. So I'll get to tightening these and get back on to the bolts below here in a minute. So I got my jack out of the way. Remember we had it under there holding that to where I could push the control arm down, up and down, and this will wiggle back and forth a little. And I managed to hold it like this, mash it on it to where I could line the bolt up. I got my bottom bolt through, and your knuckle's probably going to do this, and it's going to be really aggravating. The best thing that you can do now is the trick that I showed you from, or told you about, the brakes, using the nuts. You want your drums to stay, because you're going to use your little jack here to pull up on the outer edge of the drum right here, or right here. Don't use your studs, you don't want to break them or mess up your threads. But what it does, it puts leverage on the outer edge, and as it lifts, it's going to want to rotate in, and that sucker will line right up. You have to tap on it, because sometimes these brackets are a little tight, but you should be able to watch it from the side. And luckily, since my jack rotates, the handle rotates, I can do this. Watch. Let's see what it does at least. Wish me luck. See that? And it's going to line right up because your other bolt's already in. I even got the nut in the back. It's loose, but it's in, see? So you're just going to keep going until that sucker lines up. If it quits moving, you'll know that it's stuck. And all you got to do is tap on it a little. Okay? And it's actually just about perfect. Alright. Feels perfect. Let's see what happens. Get my bolt here ready. Almost. Let's see what's going on. It feels almost perfect, so I feel like I can tap it on in without hurting the threads. Almost. Might have to take it down a little. Remember when it got stuck? Look there. Let it down just a hair. Look at this. Boom. If it's loose enough for me to thread with no threads, boom. Beautiful. Now when you do this back one back here, you're going to want to thread it on and then tap the bolt in a little and then thread it a little further, tap it, because there's not a lot of clearance. And you're going to want to get the nut on as you go. You don't want to try to jam it through the CV axle or something, right? Or get the bolt in there and then you can't get the nut down in there behind it to thread it on. So, you know, just use your brain a little bit. Yeah, see what I'm talking about, the boot falling. Yeah, figure out, I might zip tie it up there or something. But it needs to be up there. Anyway, only thing left now, I gotta tighten these down and get my sway bar link hooked back up and my brake hose clip back on and put the wheel on. I should be ready to go. So that pretty much summed it up. That's how you put lift spacers on the struts. It's pretty much the same thing on the front. Undoing the sway bar gives you a lot more flexibility, pushing the control arm up and down. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, front or rear. Basically the same thing. So, I mean, I don't see where it'd be a whole lot different. And I already told you about the spacer down here. So, you know, we'll see. We'll see what it does. If you look right here, you can actually see the angle where it's tilted forward. Now, this is with no weight on it, with it hanging full stop to the bottom. So once there's weight on the car, see the line of the rotor versus the fender. So once there's weight on the car, it may bring it back up and extend itself back out like that, because it'll be more lined up with that bracket. But we'll just have to see at the alignment shot what happens. You will definitely need a new alignment, but I mean, it's totally worth it. So I guess that's about it. Now get to cleaning all this mess up. Thank God, huh? See my shop cat? This is baby shop cat. Hey, kitty cat. This is Celine. The dog is Mustang. I don't think I have to explain. Or maybe I have a lot of explaining to do. I don't know. But yeah, she doesn't mind my banging and grease and gasoline and impact gun and air compressor. So, or the bulldog. So there's potential in her yet. She ain't Panther, but she'll do for now. Ain't that right? Yeah, that's right. It's my other youngin right here. Got a big bully dog youngin, and this is my other youngin. There's eyes, big old orange eyes. But, alright, kid. You stuck? There's little killer razor blades. Keep them to yourself. You have it. That's how you do it. It ain't no Z71, but guarantee you it'll go some places. We've been some insane places in the two Foresters, the Impreza and the Outback, from the, you know, years ago when I had the Baja. Oh God, one of my early YouTube videos actually, all the way to now. It's been almost 10 years, so pretty crazy. But yeah, the lift kit, it comes in like super handy. Pretty awesome. Yeah. Oh, I forgot something that I'm gonna have to go back and do. Don't forget these. Oops. But that's fine, because once the car is sitting on the ground lightly, I can actually bat those 3 nuts off. It won't go anywhere. Drop the plate on it, pop the nuts back on. It's not really that big a deal, just one of those, you know, you get carried away, and they're not necessary, but, you know, they go on there, so they're going to go on there. That's where they belong. So I'm just going to have to go back and do it. Not a big deal. But at least I gave you all an idea of how to do the lift spacers, since not really a whole lot of info on them online that I found. A lot of good companies make them. A lot of better companies make them that are offset so that it won't mess up your camber. I wish I could have got those. I can't. They're very expensive. I think I got all my lift spacers, all 4, for, I don't know, around $100, and then another $50 for the trailing arm spacers that I don't have now because they were on that other Forester. But they work fine, and you know, any good alignment shop will be able to get it straight, and if they can't, they suck. If it drives them crazy, surely they got the presence of mind to know to use the you know, you can get camber bolts. So I mean, if they don't know that, then I don't know what they're doing at alignment shop. But it did happen to me with the Forester, which is why I still have these, because nobody wanted to mess with it, which kind of sucks. But chalk it up to laziness, maybe. I don't know. But anyways, this is, like I said, why I told you guys, make friends with the guys at Firestone, get in a lifetime alignment, and then when you go to replacing ball joints, tie rod ends, doing lift kits, whatever else, then they get to line it back up for free. So, you know, there's that. Comes in handy, very handy. Save you about $300. How much crap you change all the time. See, auto. I'm adjusting this motion light up here. That's what I'm doing. I had it pointed at me and what I was doing, so you know. Good. But y'all have a good night. I'm going in, give me a nice bath. I'll put this crap together, have to work tomorrow. I don't care. Getting on jack stands or whatever. Make this camper. I may not even have to work tomorrow because of the weather. So, got a garage, it'll be fine.